a union of 28, soon -1, independent states without borders works. Karl will describe the troubled history among European neighbors and the first seemingly impossible dreams of visionaries who imagined a peaceful future for the continent. After a quick romp through the past 55 years, Karl will examine the challenges faced by a union of such culturally and temperamentally diverse nations. Karl is not a political scientist. His point of view is based on personal experience, and his talk is based on research. A recent trip to Europe with interviews of citizens of the EU, immersion in the news outlets, and the views of opinion writers and serious analysts. He was born in war-torn Germany, raised in an ideologically divided Germany, and lived for 2 years with the infamous wall dividing Berlin. He left Germany at age 25, became a citizen of Canada, and retired in Mexico 11 years ago. Let's welcome Karl Homan.
Okay, thank you. There was one story, Margaret, you didn't say much about the British. And so Bernard Shaw said, the British are not very spiritual people. That's why they invented cricket, to get some sense of eternity. The European Union, happy birthday, European Union. Bon anniversaire, buen cumpleaños, feliz cumpleaños, herzlichen Glückwunsch. These are just a smattering, 5 of the 24 official languages of Europe. On March 25, 1957, the leaders of 6 nations, five nations, the leaders of 6 nations, Belgium, the Federal Republic of Germany, France, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, met in Rome and signed 2 treaties that gave birth to the European Economic Community and the European Atomic Energy Community. 6 years earlier, in 1951, only 6 years after the last World War that ravaged Europe, the same 6 nations had established as a first step towards interdependence the European Coal and Steel Community. A very smart move. So on the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome, I celebrate with Europe. To imagine how this continent has traveled from the devastation not only of 2 world wars in the first half of the past centuries, but all the wars before, the 100-year wars of the Huguenots, the 30-year war between Protestants or Lutherans and Catholics. And the EU reminds us of the limitless possibilities of history. Let me remind you that we are not talking here about the unity of states or provinces, of Jalisco and Sonora, or Louisiana and Maine, or Alberta and Ontario. We are talking about countries with hundreds of thousands of years of history. We're talking in Italy about Nero and Mussolini. In France, Charlemagne and Napoleon. In England, Henry VIII and Oliver Cromwell. In Germany, Martin Luther and Hitler. How can such countries possibly get together in peace and unity? Needless to say, the dream of writing a new chapter in Europe's history did not simply happen. It emerged from the vision of those who chose to look beyond the narrow confines of the moment into the distant horizon accompanied by an iron will, notwithstanding the endless hurdles and roadblocks along the way. It was achieved by a pragmatic approach that stressed building the new Europe brick by brick. We owe an incalculable debt of gratitude to those who laid the groundwork for what surely is the most ambitious and successful peaceful project in modern history, if not in all of history. Among them was Winston Churchill, who later did not participate much, but who in his legendary Zurich speech of 1946 spoke of the need to recreate the European family and allow it to dwell in peace, in safety, and in freedom. The first step he proposed must be a partnership between Germany and France. So a continent that had been ravaged by one war after another, on whose soil had been soaked with the blood of millions, killed because of racial theories, religious disputes, territorial claims, leaders of megalomania, of whom we know some today, economic greed. Today, Europe does not need to fear a cross-border violence between the United countries. These are the EU's greatest achievements: peace, harmony, and coexistence among its members, based on the common foundation of a commitment to democratic values, the rule of law, and respect for human dignity, not to mention the economic development of many EU states, especially in the former East Bloc countries. Heaven knows Europe has no shortage of challenges, from immigration, integration, identity, the economic stagnation in Greece, to internal security threats by terrorism, to the earthquake of Brexit, to Russian meddling with the aim of undermining European unity. But the EU navigates these minefields thanks to a handful of visionary leaders. It has shown itself in the world what can be accomplished with the audacity to dream and the will to succeed. The habit of vilifying the EU as an enemy of democracy obscures its success as the world's great institutional and underwriting of democracy. I personally never had the privilege of living in a united Europe because I left Germany just as it was forming. But I've been traveling to Europe on the average every 2 years. Because I like the freedom of showing my passport once upon landing in Paris or Frankfurt or Amsterdam, and then roam freely throughout the rest of the continent. On my last trip, I went to France, Germany, Luxembourg, and, of all places, the Ukraine, which wants to join the EU. I also visited a small town in the northwest corner of Luxembourg called Schengen, on the shores of the river Moselle, where the borderless Europe was born through the Schengen Agreement of June 14, 1985. Initially by 5 of the 10 EU member states at the time, which eventually led to the gradual abolition of border checks all across of Europe. Schengen was an appropriate choice, because if you cross the Moselle River, the bridge, you turn left, you're in Germany. If you turn right, you're in France. In Schengen, I had a conversation with two German couples about their thoughts and feelings towards the EU. One of the men, the director of Goethe institutes across the world, said that because he and his wife were born after the war and didn't experience it, it was at first hard to accept the concept. But now, he added, without Europe, we would be nothing. And his wife, a teacher, said, "My students feel they are Europeans first and Germans second." In fact, that is what their identity card will say. Citizen of Europe, and further down, nationality German. Her words echo the words of a French sales manager with whom I spoke at a rest stop on the highway to Paris near Verdun. "I want to be less French and more European." In fact, Verdun, at the fiercest battleground of World War I, has been renamed the City of Peace. And peace, lasting peace among its neighbors, is indeed the primary purpose for the creation of a united Europe, not economic prosperity, even though the first baby step towards it was an economic measure. Charles de Gaulle at the time said, "Patriotism is love of your own people. Nationalism is the hate of people other than your own." To which another French president, François Mitterrand, later added, "Nationalism always means war." Or even more strongly, the earlier words of Albert Einstein, "Nationalism is an infantile disease. It's the measles of humanity." Now, it has always been easier to find reasons why the EU should not work rather than how to explain how it works and why it works. The Union is sustained by political will, a will that was born of the moral determination to bury the continent's blood rivalries and atone for its ethnic and religious persecution, an exercise that in my mind, and by any historical measures, has succeeded admirably. Therefore, as John Bruton, former Irish Prime Minister, rightly said, the European Union is the most successful invention for advancing peace. Although de Gaulle, when he became President of France, also said, "Only peril can bring the French together. One cannot impose unity on a country like France that has 265 different kinds of cheese." So how did it all come to be? I'm going to make a little noise now, okay? So forgive me if I do. Probably. I must be nervous. I have that kind of. There you go. I want to play you something. You will recognize it. Oh. Let's do this again. I'm sure you recognized it as the last movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Ode of Joy, to Joy, which was of course set to the words of Friedrich Schiller's poem, An die Freude, the celebration of the brotherhood of man. And in the words, now the words are hardly sung because, as I said before, there are 24 different regional languages, official language in the European Union. But the English translation, roughly, of a couple of words that apply says, Joy, beautiful spark of God's fire, daughter of Elysium, which Homer in the Odyssey calls a place where people are happy. Your magic joins again what custom and history has divided. All people become brothers and sisters, where your gentle wing abides. What an appropriate hymn for Europe. You may also remember that early this year, when Macron, in his inauguration as President of France, did not play the Marseillaise, but he played the Ode to Joy, the hymn of Europe. And the Scotland National Party members of the British Parliament at first whistled and then sang the hymn of Europe as Brexit was announced. The version you heard is a version by Konstantin Selak, who wrote it or rearranged in gratitude to Europe for the liberation of visa regime for Moldovan citizens who can now travel freely in the Eurozone. The flag in front of you was adopted, and the 12 stars were adopted as a number without political connotation, as a symbol of unity. Against the blue sky of the Western world, the stars represent the peoples of Europe in a circle, a symbol of unity. Their members shall be invariably set at 12, the symbol of completeness and perfection. Council of Europe, Paris, December 1955. Let me repeat what I said earlier. The European Union was not created for economic reasons, but rather to achieve lasting peace among its neighbors. And that's what won it the Nobel Prize for Peace in 2012. As I said earlier, on May 9, 1950, Robert Schuman, lawyer and former French foreign minister, proposed the establishment of a European coal and steel community, so that the raw materials of war from which the toys of war are made was lifted from underneath the control of one country and supervised by 9 or 10 others. So that whenever a country has control, sole control over steel and iron and coal production, or does not have it, it would not be able to fight any war. There is another event that I want to mention which really moves me when I read it, even now. Skip the page. The founding fathers of the European Union were giants of politics, inspired by the creation of a peaceful, united, and prosperous Europe against all odds. One of them, Konrad Adenauer, the first Chancellor of Germany after the war, he said, "History is the sum total of things that could have been avoided." Wow. And experiences are the seeds out of which wisdom grows. Something that obviously has not sunk in yet in certain parts of the world. And then Adenauer and Charles de Gaulle, remember the two, the Lankish general, French general, Konrad Adenauer, as tall as he was, getting together at the Palace Elysium, the official residence of the French president. And after 50 years, and signed the agreement that over the last 55 years has become the engine that drives the European Union. The two neighboring countries pledged at the time to discuss all important political matters, including those related to foreign affairs, defense, education, youth, and culture. My heart is overflowing and my soul is grateful. Said an emotional French President, Charles de Gaulle, as he went over, and fluent German by the way, as he went over to Adenauer on both cheeks and giving a boisterous hug, which Germans are not used to. Leaving a flustered Adenauer to say, I have nothing to add. Just to mention a few more names, small countries like Luxembourg, Joseph Beck, played a vital role. Johann Wilhelm Bayern, banker, business, and Dutch politician. Alcide de Gasperi, Italian Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister, said the future of Europe will not be built through force or conquest, but by the patient application of democratic methods, the constructive spirit of agreement, and the respect for freedom. And here's an interesting character, Thicko Mansell, Dutchman, former resistance fighter against the Nazis, who became the first European commissioner responsible for agriculture. He was convinced that Europe needed to become self-sufficient and that a stable supply of affordable food should be guaranteed of all. And I mentioned Robert Schuman, who based his idea of the European Coal and Steel Company very much on Jean Monnet, another Frenchman. And Javier Solano, Secretary General of NATO, was asked, what is our task for the future? And he said, to make Europe a force for the good in the world. The aims of the EU are maintain peace established between its member states and its neighbors, bring European countries together in practical cooperation, ensure that European citizens can live in security, promote economic and social solidarity, preserve European identity and diversity in a globalized world, and promote the values that Europeans share. And what are their values? Europeans cherish their rich heritage and believe in human rights, social solidarity, free enterprise, a fair distribution of wealth, a fair distribution of wealth, the right to a protected environment, respect for cultural, linguistic, and religious diversities, and a harmonious blend of tradition and progress. And that is written down in the Charter of Fundamental Rights in Nice, December 2000. What does it mean to be a European citizen? Citizens of the EU's member states can travel, work, and live anywhere in the European Union. That's the major sticking point right now in the negotiations with Britain. What will happen to the EU citizen in Great Britain if it should exit the Union? The EU funds programs in the fields of education and culture to bring EU citizens closer together. EU citizens vote every 5 years in a direct vote for a new European Parliament of 751 members, which then votes on the new European Commission. The Charter of Fundamental Rights reads, the right to strike, the right of workers to unite and be consulted, the right to reconcile family life and work life, which practically means paid maternity and paternity leave. The right to health care. Wow. Socialism. Social security and social assistance for all. The throughout the Union. Well, to be a perfect European, you have to cook like a Brit, drive like the French, be talkative as a Finn, humorous as a German, humble as a Spaniard, generous as a Scotsman, controlled as an Italian, and sober as an Irishman. Okay, apart from the steel and coal community and the Elysee Palace Agreement, there are a few others. Britain did not join the EU until 20 years after, and really was never interested in political solidarity. It only was interested in the free market. Greece and Spain and Portugal joined after Franco was gone and Salazar in Portugal, the dictator, died. The single market became a reality in 1992. 1990 was a crucial year because after the fall of the Iron Curtain, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia joined, which is a bit of a problem for the Union today. And the last member to join the Union was Croatia in 2013, which means that the EU today has 510 million inhabitants, the third largest population after China and India, a force to be reckoned with. The euro entered circulation in 2002, but not in all countries, only 19 out of 28, but still 340 million use it every day, comparable to the 330 million of the US. What about enlarging the EU further? Now, the European Union is open to any European country that fulfills the democratic, political, and economic criteria of membership I mentioned earlier. The admission of a new member requires approval of all existing members. However, there will be no new country admitted during this legislative period until 2019, because the Union is trying to solidify its social and economic base. The criteria were set for admission were set in Copenhagen in 1993. Stability of institutions guaranteeing democracy. So right now, the EU suspended all talks with Turkey after 20 years. Because Turkey has gone back to an autocratic regime that's constantly violated human rights by putting opponents and journalists and human rights activists into jail. The rule of law, human rights, respect for protection of minority, existence of a functioning market economy. Probably the East Bloc countries who joined three years earlier would not have qualified under these criteria. The capacity to cope with competitive pressure, as well as the adherence to the aims of political and economic monetary union. How does the union work? Well, similar to a nation state, except that, as I said earlier, the parts are not provinces or states, they're countries. The EU has a legislative branch, which is the Parliament and the European Council, made up of the 28 heads of state, an executive branch, which is the Commission, again made out of 28 members of each country, and an independent judiciary, a court of justice, which is now the problem with Poland, because it has made the judiciary a political appointment, as you know it from the United States. And there are vast manifestations going on in Warsaw as we speak. And so these countries have been put on a warning, get with the program or else. The first step would be to take away their voting rights in the European Parliament and Council. The The second might be to cut some of the programs, because the East Bloc states have profited and benefited the most from the European Union economically. The European Union adopts legislation through a variety of legislative procedures. Most legislation needs to be proposed by the European Commission and approved by the European Council in order to become law. But over the years, the power of the European Parliament within the legislative process has been greatly increased from being limited to giving only its non-binding opinion and to participating equally in the process. I'm going to go a little faster. My time is getting short. The European Council defines the EU's overall political direction and priorities, and is made up of the 28 EU heads of states of governments, okay, the presidents and the prime minister or whatever they are, or chancellors. The president, and what amazes me too, is the quality of these people. For instance, the current president, Donald Tusk, is Polish. He's from Gdansk, which formerly was Danzig under occupied Germany. So he has seen the measles of humanity. He has experienced. He's a carpenter by trade. Okay? And yet, he was the Prime Minister of Poland and now is the President of the European Council, the most influential body. The European Parliament is very interesting. It has 751 members. The current president, here's a real night. The first elected president of the European Parliament was, guess who? Simone Veil, who just died about a couple of weeks ago. A survivor of the Holocaust, while her parents died in Auschwitz and Dachau. She too saw the measles of humanity, the infantile disease of nationalism. Okay? These are the qualities. The current one is Italian, had a law degree, was an Air Force officer, a journalist for 20 years. Where? In Lebanon, in the Soviet Union, in Somalia. What did he see? Humanity in pain, dying. Those are the kinds of people you need in politics. The president is elected for a renewable term, for a renewable 2.5 years, which means half the parliamentary year. He has to just be re-elected against the protest from Warsaw. They don't call them parties in the European Parliament, but they call them groupings. The number of seats in the EU Parliament is based proportionally on member state population. So, of course, Germany, having the largest population, has the most members, 96, followed by France at 74. About 1/3 of the delegates are women. However, there's another way of looking at it. Even though the smaller countries like Cyprus, Estonia, Luxembourg, and Malta only have 6 representatives, Germany has a population of almost 81 million inhabitants. In other words, their 96 seats means 1 seat in 843,000 inhabitants. While Malta, which only has 400,000 inhabitants, 6 seats mean 1 seat for 70,000 inhabitants. So the representation balances in that way. And if you want to be part of a party or political group, you need 25 members in the parliament from, and get this, democracy again, from 7 different European states. So not just 1, 7, okay? And if one drops out, it happened with one from Latvia, the group gets these certified and is registered only as individuals. Oh, Margaret is giving me the finger. No, that's 5 minutes. One other body that's of interest should be the Council of Ministers. Again, all member states are represented. The member states take turns holding the council presidency for 6 months, which basically means that the council travels to that country and will get to know it. So Malta just had the presidency for the first 6 months of this year. Now it's Estonia. And Estonia is interesting because Estonia is the most digitalized country in Europe, perhaps in the world. The Estonians do everything by computer, even get their medication prescribed by the doctor via digitally. It goes directly to the pharmacy. They don't get a piece of paper. And when the members will go to Estonia, they will be driven around in self-driving buses. So the topic in Estonia will be digitalization across Europe and cybersecurity. Okay? The executive, I don't have a lot of time, but the executive branch is the European Commission. Its president is Jean-Claude Juncker from Luxembourg. Again, the total members are 28, one from each state, member state, 23,000 civil servants, many of whom are interpreters, because each of the 24 languages is translated every time. And the other thing is, these members swear an oath in front of the European Court to represent Europe as a whole, not their individual countries. So if Al Franken, whom I admire vastly, said, I don't represent the US, I represent Minnesota, that doesn't go in Europe. You represent the benefit of all, not just your particular country. The judicial branch is independent, not politically appointed, 28 judges, one from each country. What else? The European budget, often said it's big, huge. No, it's not. It's cheap. Peace is cheap. War is expensive. The total budget for the European Union is 1.04% of the combined gross national income of all its members. 1.04%. Nothing. There is no price for peace. And then everybody pays in, yes, the smaller countries as well as the big ones. But there's another way of looking at it. While Germany, the UK, Netherlands, France, and so pay more than the others. You get to Cyprus and Malta and now to Greece. They receive more money than they pay. So they benefit from the European Union. So in other words, the richer countries help fund the development of the poorer countries. And what a concept. What a concept. That you share your wealth with those who have less. Well, Margaret says it's my time. Thank you for listening.
But now the important part begins because we are now opening it to your questions. So raise your hand. David or Don will bring you the mic. part. And you know so little about it, yet it's so important.
Yes, it was very interesting. I remember when the euro was promoted or brought forward, and two prescient individuals told Europe and told us that you couldn't have a monetary union without a fiscal union. It would go on the rocks. And we've seen a lot of problems about that with the southern tier. And do you have any comments? At the time, these people who said you really can't do that, they said, well, politically we have to go with the monetary union first, and later we will turn it into a fiscal union. But that hasn't happened. Do you have any comments on this?
Well, it's certainly true. I must be on. Can you hear me? Especially for Italy, the banks are in trouble. Or Greece was in trouble. But the other part comes, and there has to be changes made, and they're working on it. But it's difficult, you know. It is difficult, certainly. But the advantage is when you travel, as I do, I didn't have to change money, you know, until I got to the UK. I can compare prices. I know what I'm paying. The rest, yeah, it will come, I'm sure. But you're right, there is still work to be done.
I just want to follow up on the last person. There's been a great deal written about the curse of the euro in Europe. And you now find Greece, Portugal, Spain, and Italy in the verge of collapse. And I don't, what you described as heaven, but I don't think that there are some problems in heaven. Thank you.
Well, some devils get in, you know. Spain is no longer a problem. Greece has to enforce more austerity. But they strike. Well, that's their problem. What other countries do you mean? Italy, the banks, yes. Portugal, no problem. No. Some of it, what you hear here, that denigrates the European Union, in my opinion, is by people who are envious. They want to put Europe down to make themselves feel better, because their own country is up shit creek without a paddle.
Karl, I have a two-part question. So did all the countries do away with their individual militaries, and how in general do people in the European Union feel about NATO and the fact that the US has bases still all over Europe?
No, they did not do away with the national armies. They are standing as they are. They're growing, in fact, now that Trump has spoken. They are under some supervision by the European Defense Department, mostly in cases of peacekeepers. But as far as the individual countries are concerned, they are maintaining their own military army. But it is coordinated in whenever needed. Your second question?
NATO, how do they feel about
NATO.
U.S. bases?
Hey. Okay. Germany has 37 U.S. bases. And did you know, and maybe you don't know this, my cousins live near Ramstein, the biggest one. From where are the drones controlled that kill civilians in the Middle East? From Ramstein, not from the US, because the curvature of the earth does not allow it. So the US abuses a sovereign country to kill, once in a while, a bad guy, but hundreds of civilians. And the Germans have said, no more. Quit it. or you're out of here. So they have built already a shallow facility somewhere in Italy where it's kind of hidden. But it's a disgrace, okay? Europe will be fine, will be fine. There are 6 nations that share, Britain will be gone, but France has the atomic bomb. But the atomic weapons are shared over 6 countries in Europe. Merkel says, if old friends turn their back on us, we find new ones. So they negotiate with China. They negotiate with Russia. Putin speaks fluent Russian, fluent German. Angela Merkel speaks fluent Russian. They don't need a Japanese translator to understand each other.
We have a question over there.
Yes.
What does Great Britain hope to gain by Brexit?
I'm sorry?
What does Great Britain hope to gain by Brexit?
Everything. But they won't get it. They won't get it. There are various forms of breaking, but there is a procedure which says it's the Treaty of Lisbon, Article 7. No country leaving the EU will be punished, but they have to negotiate their deals. And the first one, as I mentioned, is the future of European citizens in Britain. And May has come up with this feeble proposal that Europeans say not good enough. Britain cannot, until it leaves, form new trade agreements with anybody by law. It will have to pay a hefty fee for leaving. Again, we are dealing with Boris Johnson, lies that say on the red buses on the side, Britain will have 350 million or 350,000 pounds a week to spend on their national health care. Bullshit! Bullshit! The application of nurses from the European Union, on which the health system depends, has dropped 96% to Brexit. Brexit is turning into a Brexodus. The major banks are leaving London, all of them, including the Bank of America, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank. London was vulnerable. The pound is going down. Britain in the first quarter of this year had the lowest growth in GDP, lower than Greece. Wow. They couldn't even get it up to 2.2%. Okay? The pound is dropping. The other thing is that's not talked about is the Euratom agreement. With the European Court controls the movement of uranium material across borders. What will happen to the power plants in Britain? What will happen to the medicine scan, the medical scans, the isotopes? They don't get that. Somebody says, satirically, Britain will return to, in 20 years, using typewriters by the candle. They're just following lines.
Thank you very much, Karl.